Hi, friends. I'm Scott Durow, and welcome to another episode of the Low-Code Revolution. I was at the recent Canadian Power Platform Summit in Vancouver when somebody pulled out their tablet and proceeded to show me an app that was truly inspiring. And that person's name was Scott McKenzie from Fort Vermilion School District. He's kindly agreed to come on the show today and hopefully give us a bit of a demo. So stay tuned. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm very well, Scott. Thank you very much for having me on.
It was really great to meet you in Vancouver. It was a beautiful sunny day.
It was a beautiful weekend, or a couple of
y-
days actually. So
yeah, absolutely. A real buzz. So many great things going on. Lots of interesting people, conversations, and yeah, the demo that you gave me was no exception. I was literally blown away by it. It was fantastic. I mean, and we've been in touch for a while. Um,
yes, really. Yes.
but thank you for coming on the show. So perhaps you could just give us a little bit of information about who you are and how you came to work for Fort Vermilion School District and how
Yeah.
you came to be in Canada, because I'm guessing by your accent you didn't originate from Canada, right? Just
No,
like
it did
myself.
not. Yeah, no, it did not. So I actually came over now just about coming on 9 years now. So when I first moved in, I was working for an oil and gas company. I've worked for oil and gas companies for sort of my entire days. I've always worked in like logistics, health and safety. Um, Sort of joined in. We arrived. My wife and I enrolled our kids into a new school, and then 2 days after they started, we went along to the parent teachers conference just to, integrate with the community. And the principal there was telling us about a new sort of research program they got involved in with the University of Alberta. And he was telling us, all these great things, and it seemed to be really complex. Um, and they were having a lot of challenges around sort of the data collection. And stupidly, at the end of the conversation, I put up my hand and said, "Oh, yeah, I'm new, da da da. I think I might be able to help you with that." So, long story short, I ended up, having many conversations. Originally built an Excel workbook, and I spent about 1,000 hours voluntary time over 3 years doing this workbook in the data. It was a great challenge, but towards the end of that period, I actually got introduced to Mike McMahon, who's the superintendent for Vermilion. So he was wanting to do the same research project that our school were doing. And the principal introduced me to Mike and said, "If you're going to do it, speak to Scott, get the workbook." So we had a conversation, sat down and said, "Yeah, no problem, I'll have the workbook." And we just got chatting into sort of various things, what he was hoping to achieve going forward. And, you know, a 20-minute conversation ended up being a couple hours. At the end of the conversation, he says, "Look, if you ever want to change your career, give me a shout." Went home, spoke to the wife, resigned from my work the next day, and then worked for Fort Vermilion 2 weeks later. And I've been here now for 5 years last month. So
Wow, that's an amazing story, and doing that voluntary work and then making it your day job and then moving forwards from
yeah.
that. And so, how did you go from that to getting into Power Platform?
So even in my previous job, and I was already within Power BI within my previous work. Yeah, there was a lot of work within Power BI, and obviously, back in those days, Power BI was like the first platform product. So the Excel workbook was great, and the one big problem we had was obviously trying, when we suddenly had all these schools up here, all these classes, was trying to get consolidated data out of the workbook. So originally from Power BI, it was all just querying individual workbooks, SharePoint connection. So we stored all our workbooks in Excel within SharePoint. Power BI was then sort of connected to every single library, every single workbook. And I mean, the refresh, it was like 2 hours to refresh this, and every workbook was adding more. So I then got more into the Power Automate, looked at, how can I extract this data out? And so, that was quite a big challenge. That eventually came, got the data extracted. We were storing that data in sort of JSON format within SharePoint libraries, but it was great because now I was only calling a SharePoint library, extracting the JSON. And, it just logically progressed from there. And then the next iteration, we were looking at the data. We were worried about some of the data quality coming out of Excel. And again, there was a lot of back and forth, go into Excel, change it because of validation. And it just logically looked at, well, I think I need to change this. And at the time, Power Apps was sort of pretty infinite, or it was pretty new. And I started having them playing around, and I thought, ooh, this has got some potential going forward. So following year, I started building our initial application. And since then, it's just grown and grown and grown. And we just keep adding more and more to it now. So.
Wow, that's an inspiring story, and a perfect grow up story as well. I mean, starting from SharePoint, you said, right, and Excel in there as well.
SharePoint, and then JSON data stored within SharePoint, and there was a little bit of a migration at one point that even before the JSON, I was extracting SharePoint lists, which it worked. It was just slower. So it's been this sort of move developmentally, identify what we need to do, try and improve speed and just improve as we're going along. So it has been a huge learning path, but it's been a great learning path as well. So.
And so you're using Dataverse now as your data store?
Yes,
right?
Yeah, we're completely Dataverse. So everything we do sort of data-wise now is complete Dataverse, where we do have some back-end SQL for some of our other enterprise systems, but we don't use them at all. So everything we do in terms of our Power Apps, all our Power BI is complete Dataverse now.
Yeah, cool. I'd love to hear that. Big fan of Dataverse, obviously. So, so perhaps you could give us a little bit of a demo. Would that be?
I would love to. Yeah, I'd love to.
I mean, I remember seeing it, and when you showed it, especially on the tablet, which was very impressive because you were just, touching this and dragging that, and it was, I was really amazed at how slick and integrated it seemed as well.
Right, let me just call up my screen. So we have quite actually a number of apps in here, and although the one I'm going to show, we actually have like 8 deployed apps now, and we actually deploy them through Teams, and we deploy them through Office 365. So they're always in our bars and so on. So, and again, for working, it just makes more sense where they're all there. So I'm going to call up this one. So this is our educational framework. So this is, version, to be quite honest, it's major version 3, but it's possibly closer to version about 2050 with all the changes. So this is the one that we're going to be using in September. This is going to replace our current one. So the app itself, we have a number of different features on it. I'm just going to go through a couple initially. So our first bit is the scope and sequence. So the scope and sequence, what we've started to do is that within our curriculum in Alberta, we obviously have them all broken down, and then we have these different skills and procedures and learning outcomes that the students are wanting or they expected to learn. Now, the big problem with that is that it's obviously getting teachers used to it. There's a lot of change, but the requirement going forward from Alberta Education is actually to report these things to parents. Now, there's so many of them. Trying to get an accurate report to a parent is actually quite difficult. So we came up with this idea that if we could restructure our skills and procedures correctly and map them, using terminology that parents would understand what's in the curriculum guides, it would end up being a lot easier. So this is, sort of our grade 1 English. And so all these bars up at the top, these are the parent expected sort of terms. And then down the side, these are the different outcomes. And then in the middle here are the skills and procedures. Now, if anybody's seen it before, this works, and it only works because of Mr. Scott Durow's fantastic drag and drop component. So this is actually the drag and drop component. So what we can do within our professional learning community, so like our curriculum specialists, they will come in for language arts and they'll look at the organized idea So here's the text form and structures. They can see all the different units. And then these are all the skills and procedures. Now, what they do within them is they go, well, this skill maps into this particular reporting idea. So they will actually go along and they will drag these in to what the reporting is going to be for the parents. And again, they can go down to oral language, they can go into vocabulary. So these all change color as they're going in. Obviously, the bars all drag and drop, so they can do it. And again, they can save this. That will save it, and then they can come in and do the other ones. So we've got this whole thing within there. Now we've actually got the ability that we can go and export printable versions of these. And again, this goes into Power BI. So they can actually go in and get printed versions of these reports. So this is coming out of Power BI. And again, we can go and request these. And we've got multiple different layouts. So these are all the different versions. And these will get distributed out to somebody. And again, they can go and request one. So as soon as they do it, they can go and do a new request. This one I go up to Power BI. We'll go and do the file, and then it comes back in and it'll store them there. And again, these files are stored within the record. So we've got the ability, different grades will have different headings. So these are all dynamically changed depending on the grade, depending on the subject. So they will all change independently. So all of this is scoped out to move and change as is. Again, all the grids are dynamic, so everything will resize. So if I go to mathematics, different colors, different grid system. And again, you can see there's only 4. So these will all, just independently resize. Like Scott said, I can show this. It works on a tablet. We can get it down on a phone. It's a little bit small, but it will actually work. So that's the first set of the app. The biggest one is going to be our sort of students. So what we do is all our students in here, we record all their clinical assessments. And we do these 3 times a year, and we have multiple different clinical assessments. So when a teacher goes in or a school principal, they'll actually come in here and it automatically logs them in, and they can go and see sort of all their groups. Now, we get this data from our school information system, cloud-based, and this will actually map all the students to the different sections. Now, the student names look a little bit funny. I've actually got an obfuscation that's actually built within the app that I can sort of hide these things at the same time. So this will be, within this teacher, these are their structures. Now, we can go and see reporting. So again, this is connected directly to our Power BI. This will call up the Power BI for this particular school. And again, the teachers have got the ability to go in, sort of click through the data, see where they are within period data. They can drill up and down. We can get sort of a whole load of data from this as well. And again, if we go and filter, we can go and see, I only want to see the language arts, grade 3 information. Again, this is all filtered. So these Power BI reports are being driven by Power Apps filters.
It looks so pretty, so pretty. And what I'm really, really loving is the fact that it all looks so integrated into Teams there, right? Because it's hosted into Teams, and like the UI, the drop downs, the text boxes, all looks very much like that Office application.
Yeah, and these are all now the modern controls. So I spent quite a bit of time recently sort of changing them all to modern. I do appreciate that a lot of these are still in sort of preview, but if you don't start with them, you can't move forward. And when they do go into GA, you're then 6 months behind. So I always like to try and start a little bit earlier. So again, our teachers, they'll come in here and they will then click the students and they can see all their previous assessments, and they can call up any of these assessments and come in. And again, these are the new forms within the Power Apps. This is the header. Now, interesting enough, this description term, this is the new icon, sorry, not the icon, the new avatar control. So I didn't want a drop-down box there. I've got drop-downs here. But this is actually the avatar control because I want to color this. And again, the coloring of this comes off the base color palette. These are determined based on, what if I change something, it will change the colors automatically. So again, we have, this information now. Again, just to give you an idea of how quick these are. So this lookups for these scoring tables, we have about just over 1 million rows of scoring table calculations in our Dataverse. So
Oh,
when the
yeah.
teachers are actually going in and doing these numbers, this is essentially filtered down to 1 million rows of data to get this exact terminology and
Impressive
exact
performance you've got
scoring.
there. Yeah.
So in terms of performance, it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
So again, different forms, we'll call it different, layouts. They all have slightly different layouts, so we can go through these in different ways. And again, all different styles in there. So that's the one. We then get the ability to see what's called the interventions. So this is where if we've got students who are struggling a little bit, we can add extra work. And again, one of our new features that we're going to have this coming year is we've now got our own co-pilot in here on our own large language model. So I can come in here.
You've got to say Copilot 3 times, and then everyone listens. That's what it is.
Well, yes. So it's going to come in. Do you want some information? No. So again, this will come in and say, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to look at sort of number sense, and this will give me, what the evaluations. And we can go through this. And then when it comes to the end of evaluation, it will then give the teachers methodologies for improvement. It'll give additional questioning that these can be applied to students. So we've got, obviously Copilot built in here. This is still early doors. We're still doing a little bit of work on it.
And adaptive cards that you're using there, is that?
Adaptive cards, yeah. Adaptive cards on the Copilot. So again, it's all done. Again, that curriculum when we're doing for the layout. So again, there's another bit up here. It's what's called the continuum. So I can now come into any given student. Essentially what it's going to do is bring up that report card and we can go through it into there. Now, we've also got the ability to add individual ones. So if we've got a student that's particularly struggling, we can add, we can actually build these from individuals. So we can come in and we can go, well, this is, a grade 3, and we want language arts. So we can go and get sort of all these skills and procedures for language arts. And again, we can drag these in for an individual student. Again, we might need a grade 2 skill because they're not quite there with that, or grade 5 because they're actually improving. So we've got the ability for teachers to go in and build individual plans that are mapped to these students. And then what the teachers can do is they can actually come in here and they can color code these specifically like the assessment colors. So again, they've got the ability to mark these through. So as they're going through the whole year, they can start marking these up. And again, this works for all our assessments. So when we're doing the assessments to grade 1, we know what the skills and procedures are mapped. We can color code automatically from their assessment, or the teacher then has the ability to come in here and obviously autonomously add it in. So there's quite a few areas, but this is all sort of structurally done from those drag and drops.
So there's obviously a lot of data you're moving around there. You're saving data, loading data. Have you got any performance tips? So if someone wants to build an application like this, of this complexity, have you got any kind of tips that you could, words of wisdom you could impart?
I think the biggest word of wisdom is understanding what data you need on screen at any given point and only take that data in. I think, I have a tendency that, or not tendency, but I used to have a tendency, it's like, especially in my Dataverse tables, I was very conscious like the old SQL way, tall and narrow, and that's great. My Dataverse tables now are, a lot of them are very, very wide. But in terms of when I'm doing these filter queries, I'm doing the add column, show column, the drop column. So I'm only taking a very small subset of what I'm taking in there. And I think, occasionally that does help, not always. But understanding the data, what it's doing, where it's going, what you expect to see at any given point. I think just knowing that and getting it back to a limiting view. And again, don't try and clutter your screen too much. Now, I'm going to go backstage a little bit in a moment. So I think Microsoft's best practice is to say no more than 300 controls on a screen. I think this one at the moment, this app, has 2,600 controls on one screen, and it's still pretty quick.
Yeah.
So again, structurally, hiding these things, making sure you've got only what's visible, making sure that all these sort of variables are passed correctly, just understanding those. I think that's just the trick with it. But
Because you've optimized it, I guess that's the thing, right? Best practice is to keep it low, but then you've obviously heavily optimized this to make sure that it can deal with that number of controls.
yeah, so there is a huge amount of back end work just in processing, but interface wise, it's pretty quick generally.
So perhaps quickly, before we wrap up here, you can just give us a little sneak preview behind backstage, just to
Yes.
show what it looks like.
So this is the backstage, and as I promised, I like to call this my one screen wonder. So it is literally one screen, and I do make extensive use of containers and layers. Everything is containered and layered. The other one thing I do significantly is I have a bunch of buttons that are hidden in a container, and these are my reusable formulas. So I mean, even like this master reset, this is the one that the screen comes in and resets everything. So rather than always putting in like the on formula start and everything, I'm just doing select, FN reset. So if I'm going to use, a lot of similar ones, or I'm going to use it a lot of the time, I'll put it on a button, hide it. And then when I'm clicking these buttons, it literally is just select that. And again, it saves hunting for things significantly quicker. So again, there's my layouts, there's my header. Again, there you can see the new modern controls there. This is my continuum pages. So here's my continuum. There's my scope and sequence. So this is the gallery at the top, the one that comes up. And then these are the slots at the side. So there's my individual program planning slots. There's my standard skills and procedures slots. And then within there's all the slots detail gallery. And then within there's more containers. And then here's Mr. Scott Durow's fantastic drag and drop component, buried away at the back there. And again, these change depending on the layout. So again, the student containers are my teachers list, my students list. And again, this is using the Power Catalog Fluent Details list. As much as I love all the new modern interfaces, the table one at the moment, because you can't resize the columns, just is a little bit inflexible. So I still use the Power Catalog Fluent Details list. But you can see that everything is driven under the sort of layouts. And again, there's the Power BI within there, layouts within layouts. And this just makes sure that everything is resizing correctly. When I go and play this, and I can go and check that when I go to canvas size, it's going to resize, or I can go to my tablets and it will resize. And again, I'm using sort of the breakpoints in there. There is text changes based on breakpoints. Again, those are set up in my formula bars. So all of these things now, in terms of the trying to get data to move. And again, there's all my Teams channel deep links.
Yeah.
So you can see here all my formulas for font sizes, my button widths, and these change depending on the break sizes.
So although you've got lots and lots of nested containers there, and you've got lots and lots of different things on one screen, I'm guessing you just get the app into a position where you've got certain controls shown, and then you can just debug it and build it accordingly. Does many controls on the same screen cause problem in terms of things overlaid on top of each other, or?
Yeah, so they're all there. So again, you can see too many controls on the screen. So the current one has 3,045 controls on it, which exceeds the threshold of 300. So, I mean, I think what people not necessarily understand is, yes, there's this, but there's not 300 controls visible. And that's the trick. It's how many are visible on screen.
Yeah.
So yes, you can have a huge amount, count how many are visible at a time, because again, in any context, it becomes a lot easier when you're not having to do it. And again, reusing sort of galleries or containers, because this teacher's list or container, because I can put things into containers and reuse them. Again, you can scope it slightly differently. So if it needs to do something, you can change it. So it becomes a lot easier when you have a very defined layout. And again, variables wise, there's huge amount of variables. But again, on one screen, passing variable between screens, this becomes a little bit quicker. You don't have that UX load speed issue where you're flipping between screens. So again, performance-wise, there is some real performance benefits of being single screen. It takes a little bit more skill and a little bit more work. But again, if you ever use this and you're into model, and we have a lot of model apps as well, calling up custom pages and model apps, if you're used to building one screen, it becomes so much easier.
Yeah, yeah. And that's your grow up story as well, starting from humble beginnings and then gradually increasing that complexity over and over until you've got to the place you are today, which is, well, it's literally fantastic. So all our listeners hopefully will be able to see why I was so amazed at what you built. And thank you so much for coming on the show. And it's been so good to learn about, all the good work you're doing as well, and Power Platform enabling you to do or improve this education framework and constantly improving it over time.
Right. Yeah. And, massive shout out to the work that Microsoft's doing in the platform. I mean, it's been great. Every sort of day I get something new and it's like, oh, you go and play with that. So, and I mean, that unfortunately gives its own problems because I'm constantly evolving. But, if you don't evolve, it's what it is. And there's a couple of new services coming out in the Microsoft educational space in the next month or two that I've already started to integrate in terms of maths and literacy. So, with the Microsoft educational stack as well, we have some other benefits that we get that others don't see. So it's just trying to integrate those now as well. But if you keep giving me things to play with, I will play with them. So.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me. So.
And if you want to learn more about Scott's work at Fort Vermilion, the link to his social profile is in the description. And also, if you want to learn about the drag and drop component that Scott was mentioning, we've also got a link to that in the description. But yeah, thank you once again, Scott. And thank you for watching. This has been the Low Code Revolution. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel, be notified of future episodes. So catch you next time.